I wasn't alone on this lost 1980s hiking trail. Good evening, and welcome back. It's good to see you again. And for those wondering where I've been, let's just say some stories aren't meant to be told before they're finished. I had to disappear for a little while. One day, perhaps I'll tell you why. While I was away, my good friend Michael, who wants to say hello.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight?
He kept the lantern burning and guided you through the darkness. I want to thank him for that. If you were here for his stories, let me know in the comments. How do you think Michael did? I'd love to hear what you thought. Now, oh, how I've missed saying this. Welcome to Sleepy Echoes Unwind, where the night remembers old stories. Now, light your lanterns, slow your breathing, and let's drift into the hush of the night. There's a special kind of comfort you find when you're all alone in the wilderness. A quietness. It makes you feel like you might be the first person to ever walk that patch of earth, even when you know you're on a trail thousands of others have walked. But that comfort disappears instantly the second you get that feeling. The feeling that you're not alone anymore. And I don't mean hearing a squirrel or spotting a deer. I mean the kind of not alone that makes the little hairs on your arms stand on end. The kind that makes the forest stop feeling like a sanctuary and start feeling like a trap. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you a story from my past. Let's go back to 1988. I was 22 and filled with that stupid confidence you only have when you're young. The sun was out, the air was crisp, and I had a whole day to get lost on some forgotten hiking trail deep in the Pacific Northwest. I honestly thought I was just going for a walk. I thought I was in charge. If I had any idea who or what also called those woods home, if I knew what was watching me from the second I stepped out of my beat-up Ford Escort, I would have gotten back in, driven until the tank was dry, and never once looked back. But I was young, and the woods were quiet. A little too quiet, as it turned out. Section 1. The Setup. The day really started like a picture-perfect memory. It was late September, that sweet spot in autumn when you can still feel the summer warmth, but the first bite of winter is in the air. I was working a dead-end job stocking shelves, and the boredom was just soul-crushing. I needed out. Not a whole vacation, just one day. A day to breathe air that didn't smell like floor wax and old fruit. I'd found this old hiking guide at a garage sale. A flimsy paperback from the 70s, pages yellow and smelling like dust. It was full of trails that had been forgotten for years, trails that had probably just faded back into the wild. One name stuck with me: Whisper Creek Trail. The book called it a moderately challenging loop with rewarding old-growth scenery, and said the trailhead was off some decommissioned logging road. That was the hook for me. It wasn't in any new guides. It felt like a secret, just for me. My gear was exactly what you'd expect from a cocky 22-year-old in '88. Worn-out high-top sneakers, not hiking boots, a flannel shirt over a band tee, and jeans that were already getting thin. In my dad's old external frame backpack, I had one bottle of water, a squished PB&J, a compass I kinda knew how to use, and the tattered map from the book. My one piece of tech was my Sony Walkman, fresh batteries and a mixtape of The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen. The perfect soundtrack for being alone, or so I thought. The drive itself felt like part of the adventure. Paved highway turned to a county road, which turned to gravel that shook my poor car apart. Then, I found it. The logging road. Just two dirt ruts vanishing into a wall of giant firs and ferns as tall as I was. I parked the car, and the engine ticked in the sudden, deep silence. I just stood there for a minute, leaning against the hood, and just breathed. The air smelled like pine and damp earth, so clean it felt like it was scrubbing my lungs out. All I could hear was the wind sighing through the tops of the trees. It was perfect, exactly what I needed. I threw my pack on, clipped the Walkman to my belt, and put my headphones in. The opening riff of Just Like Heaven started up as I found the trailhead. It was just a single, rotting wooden post with the letters WCT barely visible. The path was so faint, covered in pine needles and moss. It wasn't really a trail anymore, more like the memory of one. And I walked right in without a second thought. The first hour was amazing. The forest was like a cathedral. Sunlight cut through the canopy in these bright shafts, lighting up the moss that covered everything. The trail, faint as it was still easy enough to follow as it climbed. I felt good. The music in my ears made a little bubble around me, like I was the star of my own movie, exploring some lost world. I found a little clearing and stopped to eat half my sandwich and check the map. The book said it was a 5-mile loop that should take around 3 hours. I was about an hour in, so I figured I was almost at the halfway point where it would start heading back down. I took a swig of water, feeling pretty proud of myself. This was freedom. I put the Walkman away. I wanted to hear the actual forest for a bit. The silence that hit me was big, but it wasn't empty. It was full of little sounds. A squirrel chattering, bugs humming, leaves rustling. I packed up my stuff and kept going. I was happy. I was confident. I had no idea what was coming. Section 2. The Unraveling. The change was so small at first, I almost missed it. It started with the trail. It was getting harder and harder to see, disappearing under fallen trees and thick bushes. I had to pull out my compass more often, just to make sure I was still heading in the right general direction. That easygoing confidence from a half hour ago was starting to fade, replaced by the low-level stress of actually having to work at this. And then I heard it. Snap. Wait, did I lose you? If you're still with me, comment, "Still listening." I have a feeling the hardest part of this story is still ahead. It was a sharp, clear sound, the sound of a dry stick breaking under a heavy foot. It came from somewhere off to my right, deep in the woods. My head jerked toward the noise, and I froze. I scanned the trees, looking for a deer, maybe a bear. I saw nothing. The forest was dead still. "Just a deer," I whispered, and my own voice sounded way too loud. Had to be, right? Animals make noise. That's what they do. I waited another minute, listening. Silence. I shrugged it off and started walking again, but a little faster now. That comfortable quiet was gone, and I couldn't get it back. 5 minutes later, I heard a rustle in the bushes. Same direction, off to my right. But this wasn't one sound. It was a shuffling, scraping noise, and it sounded like it was moving parallel to me. I stopped again. My heart started beating a little faster. That wasn't an animal just sitting there. I stood perfectly still, straining to hear. The second I stopped, the rustling stopped. I held my breath for a full minute. The silence that came back felt heavy, watchful. This wasn't peaceful silence anymore. This was the absence of sound. I took one slow step forward. From the woods to my right, another soft thump on the forest floor, almost perfectly in time with my own footstep. I froze solid. My blood went ice cold. That's not a deer. Deer are jumpy. They run when they hear you. They don't sneak. They don't mimic you. A bear would be crashing through the brush, making a racket. This was quiet, deliberate. Hello? I called out. My voice cracked. Is somebody there? Only the wind answered, and it sounded less like a whisper and more like a hiss. I stood there forever, every nerve screaming. Part of my brain was desperately trying to explain it away. The acoustics in the woods are weird. It's some small animal going the same way by coincidence. It's my imagination. But that old, primal part of my brain knew better. The part that kept our ancestors alive through long, dark nights in forests just like this one. That part knew, with absolute certainty, that I was being followed. I gave up on my hike. I started walking fast, my eyes jumping between the trail I could barely see and the dark woods to my right. Every few steps, I'd hear it. A soft footstep, a quiet rustle. Always there, always keeping pace. It was a sick game of cat and mouse, and I was just beginning to realize I was the mouse. Panic started to bubble up, cold and sharp. I fumbled for my map, but the squiggly lines just looked like gibberish. I couldn't make sense of it. The map showed a nice, neat loop. The trail I was on was a fading, branching nightmare. Did I take a wrong turn? Was I even on the trail anymore? The sun was getting lower, casting these long, creepy shadows that twisted the woods into a maze. The air was getting colder. I'd only brought my flannel, and a shiver went through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I decided to just push forward, as fast as I could. The only goal was to get back to the car. I put my head down and started to jog, my sneakers slipping on the damp ground. The sounds to my right got faster too, easily keeping up. The rustling was louder now, less sneaky. It sounded excited. After 15 minutes of this panicked pace, I broke into a small clearing, and I stopped dead. My heart just seized up in my chest. It was a campsite, but it was all wrong. There was a little dome tent, the kind you saw everywhere in the 80s, but it was partly collapsed. One of the poles was snapped, sticking out like a broken bone. There was a fire pit with half-burnt logs, but there was no other gear. No sleeping bags, no cooler, nothing. And then I saw the backpacks. 3 of them, lined up neatly against a fallen log. They were old external frame packs, just like mine, covered in mildew. They looked like they'd been sitting there for months. But that wasn't the weirdest part. Next to the backpacks was a single hiking boot. A woman's boot. It looked clean, almost new, completely out of place with all the decay. And next to the boot was a pile of Skittles. A bright mound of candy just sitting on the damp ground, like someone had just dumped the bag out. The colors looked sick against the browns and greens of the forest. My brain just short-circuited. A collapsed tent, abandoned packs, one clean boot, a pile of candy. It felt like some disturbing piece of modern art. It just screamed wrongness. Who leaves 3 backpacks? Who leaves 1 boot? Why is there a pile of Skittles just sitting there, untouched by animals? I felt sick. This wasn't a campsite. This was a stage. A trap. Or the aftermath of something awful. And as I was standing there, frozen, I heard a new sound. It wasn't a snap or a rustle. It came from the trees, from the same direction I'd been hearing the sounds. It was a low, wet, guttural sound. A series of soft clicks, like someone slowly clicking their tongue against the roof of their mouth. That's not an animal sound. It was deliberate. It was intelligent. And it was way too close. Whatever denial I had left just shattered. I wasn't imagining it. It wasn't a deer. Someone was in these woods with me. Someone who leaves bizarre, terrifying scenes in the forest. Someone who toys with you. And now, they were done playing hide and seek. They were closing in. My entire world had shrunk down to this creepy clearing and that horrible clicking sound. Every instinct in my body was screaming one thing: run. But where? Back the way I came, right toward that sound? Or forward, deeper into a forest that had already proven it could swallow you whole? Before I tell you what I did next, what my panicked brain chose in that split second, think about it. If you find a dark fascination with stories like this, with the unexplained things that wait in the wild, maybe subscribe and hit the notification bell. You never know what's waiting out there in the woods. Section 3. The Game of Survival. There was no choice. Going back meant running straight at whatever was making that sound. My only shot was forward. I didn't even look at the map. The map was a joke. The only thing that was real was the terror pushing me. I turned my back on that freaky campsite and just ran, plunging into the trees on the other side of the clearing with a desperation I didn't know I had in me. The world was just a green and brown blur. Branches slapped my face, roots grabbed at my ankles. I stumbled and fell to one knee, the impact rattling my teeth. But I was up in a flash, running on pure adrenaline. My lungs were on fire. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would explode. Behind me, the sounds changed. The stealth was gone. Now it was just heavy, crashing footsteps. It was keeping pace with me, but not getting closer. Not yet. It felt like it was hurting me, pushing me where it wanted me to go. The clicking stopped, and something worse started. A low, airy whistle. Not a song, just a single wavering note that cut right through the sound of my own panic. It was the sound you'd use to call a dog, and that thought sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Huge mistake. In that split second, my foot snagged a root and I went down, hard. The air exploded out of my lungs, and I just lay there for a second, face pressed into the damp leaves, gasping. A sharp pain shot through my ankle. I pushed myself up, my body screaming, and leaned against a huge fir tree trying to breathe. I scanned the woods behind me. The whistling had stopped. The crashing had stopped. The silence that fell was worse than any noise it had been making. And then, I saw it. It wasn't a clear look, just a glimpse, a flicker of movement between two trees about 50 yards back. For just a second, a figure stepped halfway into a patch of fading light. It was tall, so tall, and thin. It looked like it was wearing a tattered, dark coat that just hung off its skinny frame. Its movements were slow, not like someone out of breath, but like a predator enjoying the moment. I couldn't see a face, just a long, lean silhouette. It was holding something long and dark in one hand, down by its side. A stick? A branch? My terrified mind filled in the blanks with much worse things. It just stood there, watching me. It knew I'd fallen. It knew I was hurt. It was giving me a head start. It was toying with me. This whole time, it could have caught me easily. The chase was a game. That thought, the sheer, cruel arrogance of it, did something to my fear. It didn't make it go away, but it sharpened it into rage. I was not going to be some psycho's toy. I was not going to end up as another weird prop in a campsite. I tested my ankle. It hurt like hell, but I could stand on it. I couldn't outrun it anymore. I had to hide. I had to be smart. My eyes darted around. The forest was thick here. 30 feet away was a gigantic fallen tree. The roots had been ripped out of the ground, leaving a deep pit, and the hollowed-out trunk was like a dark tunnel. It was a perfect hiding spot. Maybe too perfect. But it was all I had. I moved as quietly as I could, trying to choke back my ragged breathing. Every step on my bad ankle was agony. I didn't look back. I couldn't stand to see if it was moving yet. I just focused on that log. 10 more feet. 5. I dove into the opening, scrambling as far into the damp, dark-smelling tunnel as I could get. Inside, I curled into a ball, pulling my knees to my chest. It smelled like dirt and rot. I pressed my face against the rough, wet wood, held my breath, and just listened. For a long time, there was nothing but the sound of blood pounding in my ears. Did it see me? Did I lose it? A tiny piece of hope started to grow in my chest. Then I heard the whistle again. It was close. Way too close. That single, eerie note. It was moving slowly past the opening of my log. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying, "Please don't look in here. Please just keep walking." Then, footsteps. Heavy, slow, crunching on the leaves right outside my log. One step, another. They stopped, right beside me. I could hear it, breathing. It wasn't heavy panting. It was a slow, deep, rattling breath. A wet, sick sound. I could smell it too. A foul odor seeped into the log. Wet earth, rotting meat, and something sharp and metallic, like old blood. My entire body was locked up. I was going to die. Right here, in this log. I bit down on my hand to keep from screaming. I heard a soft scraping on the outside of the log, like fingernails dragging across the bark. Then came the clicking. That wet, horrible clicking sound. It was right next to my head, just inches of rotting wood away. It knew. It knew I was in here. It knew the whole time. I waited for a hand to tear through the wood and grab me. But nothing happened. The breathing just continued, slow and steady. And then, the footsteps started again, moving away, continuing in the direction I'd been running. The whistling started up again, that one haunting note, getting fainter and fainter until the forest swallowed it. I didn't move for what felt like an hour. I just stayed curled up, shaking, trapped in the dark with the phantom smell of decay. This was part of the game. It found me, let me know it could take me whenever it wanted, and then let me go. It was breaking me down. Finally, the need to survive kicked in. I couldn't stay in the log. Dusk was turning to black. If I was going to move, it had to be now. I crawled to the edge of the log and peered out. The woods were bathed in a deep gray twilight. Everything looked wrong, menacing. There was no sound, no whistle. I seemed to be alone again. And then I saw a light. It was faint, a tiny, steady pinprick of orange far off in the distance, through a gap in the trees. It had to be a porch light, a street lamp. It was civilization. It was a direction. It was hope. I didn't care about the trail. I didn't care about anything but that light. I scrambled out of the log, ignoring the pain in my ankle, and started moving. Not running, just a frantic, limping shuffle from tree to tree, using the trunks as cover. Every shadow looked like that tall, gaunt figure. Every gust of wind sounded like that whistle. It was the longest walk of my life. Hours passed. I fell over and over, cutting my hands on rocks. I think I was crying, just silent tears of pain and exhaustion and fear. but I never took my eyes off that light. Finally, the trees started to thin out. I could hear the distant hum of cars. I pushed through one last wall of ferns and collapsed onto hard, solid asphalt. I was on a road, a 2-lane country highway. Across the road was a small house with its porch light on, the light that saved me. I was out. I just lay there on the cold pavement, sobbing, before I found the strength to get up and limp toward that house. Section 4. The Haunting. The couple who lived there, in their 60s, were kind and totally baffled by the muddy, bloody, terrified kid who showed up on their porch after 10 p.m. They gave me a blanket and some water and called the sheriff. The deputy who arrived listened to my story with that look of professional concern mixed with a whole lot of doubt. He and another officer found my car right where I'd left it. They said it was easy to get turned around in those woods, that your mind plays tricks on you when you're lost and scared. They never found the Whisper Creek Trail. They never found the campsite with the tent and the pile of Skittles. When they asked me to show them on a map, I couldn't. It was all a panicked blur. To them, I was just some kid who got in over his head. But I knew what I saw. For years afterward, I was obsessed. I spent hours in libraries, poring over old topographical maps, trying to find that logging road, that trail. I searched microfilm for articles about missing hikers in that county from the 70s and 80s. I was looking for a pattern, for a name to go with one of those 3 abandoned backpacks. I never found a thing. It was like the trail, and whatever happened on it, existed outside of the recorded world. That campsite haunts me more than the chase itself. The 3 packs felt like headstones. The single clean hiking boot. A trophy. A warning. And the Skittles. Why the candy? It was so childish, so out of place. It felt like a deliberate touch of madness. It was a message, and the message was chaos. A complete disregard for any kind of human logic. And the thing itself, the tall, thin silhouette. I've gone over that 1-second glimpse a million times. The way it moved, the way it played with me. It wasn't driven by hunger. It was driven by something far more terrifying. Intelligence. A cool, ancient intelligence that saw me as a plaything, and it let me go to prove it was in control. Conclusion. I quit my job the next week and moved away a month later. It didn't matter. You can't outrun a memory. For years, I couldn't sleep without a light on. The sound of a branch snapping, someone whistling a single note. It all takes me right back to that log, to the smell of rot and the sound of that wet breathing right outside. That's what it really taught me in that log. It was showing me that the world I thought I knew, the safe, predictable world, is just a thin layer over something much older and stranger. It let me escape, but it took my certainty. It took my peace. I'm older now. The raw terror has faded into a dull, constant ache. But I never go into the woods, not even a local park, because sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the game ever really ended, or if it's just on pause. And I think about all the other forgotten trails on all the other old maps. How many other people walked in just like I did and never got to see a light in the darkness? If you made it to the end, comment "good night," or if you're already fast asleep, I hope it's a blessed one. For those of you who are still awake, blow out your lanterns. We shall meet again.